It's rush hour on a normal weekday morning at Wellington's busy railway station. Swift, efficient electric multiple unit trains delivering students, workers and shoppers to the city. They come from as far away as the Hutt Valley, Paraparaumu and Johnsonville. Of these three electrified routes into the capital, the 10.5 kilometre line from Johnsonville is the shortest, but it's also the most colourful and the one with the most interesting story to tell. The line leaves the Hutt Valley and the main trunk lines a kilometre or so from Wellington Station and follows a steep and winding route through the Nio Gorge, passing through 5 short tunnels before reaching the first station, Crofton Downs. There are 6 more stations and 2 more tunnels before the end of the line at Johnsonville. But the line did not always end here. It was once part of a much greater enterprise, the Wellington and Manawatu Railway Company's grand American-style system that ran to Longburn, linking Wellington with railways in the north. After passing through its present terminus at Johnsonville, the line came under this bridge and followed the road to the left to join the course of the present motorway in the background. It ran to a point just south of Takapu Road. From there it continued on the east side of the present main line through Redwood to Tawa, known then as Tawa Flat, from where it followed the existing alignment northwards. A mile or so north of Johnsonville, the line crossed the Belmont Stream on the famous Belmont Viaduct, thought by some at the time to be the highest wooden viaduct in the world. It was 172 feet high, 373 feet long, and stood on 14 concrete piers, each sunk 20 feet into the ground. These days, the multiple units climb the 1 in 40 grades with consummate ease. They give no hint of those early years when trains were long and heavy and when motive power was steam. In the early days, the going was tough enough, but as traffic grew, the curves and the gradients became more of a problem, creating the need for more and stronger locomotives. Double heading, often with bankers in the rear, became a common sight, and a favourite place to photograph them was here on the big curve through Crofton Downs, where work on the building of the line had begun in September 1879. Crofton Downs today is a small commuter station adjoining a garden centre, and it's still a great place to photograph trains. The mighty but unsuccessful Garrett locomotives were tried out over this section, and this test train was caught by the photographer crossing the old trestle bridge at the start of the gradient, and then passing through Simla Crescent, where today there is also a quiet suburban station where the trains glide effortlessly, pausing briefly to let their passengers on and off. In 1908, the whole of the Wellington and Manawatu Railway Company's line was bought by the government, and by 1914, traffic had grown to the point that the need for a new and easier route was becoming pressing. A number of options were investigated, and in 1928, work began on what became known as the Tawa Flat deviation. This was completed in 1937, with 2 long double-track tunnels, and followed a much straighter and less steep route. It was also 3.5 miles shorter. It was here at Tawa that the new deviation joined up with the old line. It was then planned to lift the old line in its entirety, but the locals wanted to retain a suburban service between Wellington and Johnsonville. Several proposals were mooted, including a tram service along the route. But at a public meeting in Johnsonville, a Mr. H.L. Cummings suggested that the line be retained and electrified using multiple unit trains, a system he'd seen and been impressed by in Melbourne. It was the third railway electrification scheme in New Zealand, The Otira-Arthurs Pass section through the long and steeply graded Otira Tunnel on the Midland Line had been electrified in 1923, and the suburban line between Christchurch and Lyttelton went electric in 1929. Both these systems used 1500 volts DC, one used on the Melbourne suburban system. It was therefore a logical choice for the Johnsonville line and the line through the Tower Flat deviation, which was also to be electrified as far as Paikokariki. 6 motor coaches and 6 trailers were built by the English Electric Company in Preston, and the service started with a grand and well-attended opening ceremony on the 7th of July 1938. Sadly, these original sets have been scrapped. The cars were initially painted royal blue with a silver stripe along the side. Later they got the standard carnation red livery used for many years on all passenger carriages and still seen on many of the units today. The 660 horsepower motor cars had 4 traction motors, weighed 48 tonnes and could carry 60 passengers. The trailers weighed 27 tonnes and could carry 72 passengers. All cars were 63 feet 4 inches long. In 1942, 3 more motor coaches and 3 more trailers were obtained from the English Electric Company, followed in 1946 by a further 46 motor coaches and 70 trailers for use on the Paikokariki section. With the withdrawal of the EW class locomotives in 1983, more units were obtained from the Hungarian firm Ganz Mavag, but because they are too big for the tunnels, they are not used on the Johnsonville line. When the service opened, there was a goods yard and a wooden station at Johnsonville, but these days the yard is a car park and the old station has been replaced. Today, a refurbishment program is underway, with the old vinyl seat covers being replaced with fabric, and new Brecknell Willis pantographs being fitted. A ride to Johnsonville usually begins at Platform 1, with a half-hour service outside the busy periods. There's plenty to occupy the enthusiast waiting for the train to arrive. This set, still with its big headlight, has just arrived from Taita and is entering the cleaning yard to be groomed for its next round of duties. More trains join it as the rush hour subsides. The overhead termination structure here must be the most massive in the country. This is the most recently refurbished set. And you can watch the Hungarian units arriving from other places. Some of these too will gravitate to the cleaning yard for a spruce up. But eventually our train arrives. The commuters disembark. And we set off. The trip begins with a sedate run through the yard. Past the new stadium, and then gathers speed before the steep gradient up towards the first of the 7 tunnels. Climb begins. In a few moments we'll be entering the first tunnel. These tunnels are all curved and all have names. The first is the outlet tunnel. The others are Kaiwara, Gorge, Lizard, Nio, Kaka and Tui. We passed through 5 of these before reaching the first station, Crofton Downs. The big curve here has always been a good spot to watch the trains come and go, in both directions. Here again we get a good glimpse of the newly refurbished cars. We then head for the next station, Nio, known originally as Crofton, and the busiest of the 3 crossing points for up and down trains. Here we alight and watch some of the trains passing each other. This is the start of the afternoon rush hour, and two trains, one of them bringing school children home, make a crossing. Back on board, and as soon as the city-bound train is out of our way and the signal has cleared and the points reset, we're off on the next stage. Still climbing and winding, we pause briefly at Awarua Street, a small station built at the time of the electrification. Then it's onwards and upwards once more towards Simla Crescent, also established at the time of the electrification, in an attractive setting with grassy areas on both sides of the track. This station is also a good one for watching trains. Because of the steepness of the line, the units used on this route consist of a motor coach and just one trailer on the uphill end. 3 such sets can be run together to make up a 6-car train. After Simla Crescent, there's a brief stop at Box Hill before heading for Kandala. Kandala is the fifth station on the line and is also a crossing station like Nio, but with a longer loop. There's also a traction substation here. Shortly after Kandala is a deep cutting leading to tunnel number 6, Kaka. A little further on, our train pulls into Rauroa, the highest point on the line. Rauroa station is just before the last tunnel, Tui, and the overhead seems so low here you could almost hang your washing on it. There was once a siding at Rauroa where the last regular freight trains on the line used to carry stock. This is a typical such train ascending the gradient towards Rauroa behind EW 1803 back in the late 60s. These days, the units have the Johnsonville branch pretty much to themselves. Weed spray trains, track and overhead maintenance trains, and the ballast tamper make occasional visits, but not much else. There was a time when railway enthusiasts would occasionally run carriage trains on the line, usually hauled by EW electric locomotives. This was an excursion in December 1981, just 2 years before the EW locomotives were withdrawn from service. And in 1983, when the axe did finally fall for these locomotives, a series of farewell trips over the electrified lines in Wellington included a run up the first half of the Johnsonville line. Here, the train is arriving at Nio. After Rauroa, it's downhill through the tunnel and on to the final stop. This really is the end of the line. Those spring-loaded concrete pads ensure that nothing gets past, although that splintered beam looks as if it's not totally through lack of trying. Johnsonville is a vibrant suburb with lots of car parking for shoppers and rail commuters. But if you don't want to go shopping, you can always watch the trains. It's time to reboard and head back to Wellington. Back through Raroa. At the Wadestown Loop, between tunnels 3 and 4, we cross a train heading for Johnsonville. Then it's down through the last of the tunnels and a final dash for home. The evening colours as we approach Wellington are very attractive as we make our final dash for home. our journey is at an end, and we leave the line to the thousands of commuters who ride it every day and for whom it's probably just a humdrum ride.